directions, but the data at the moment seems to be piling up. The long-term data, okay, let me stop for a second, give everybody a little view here. As we get closer to events or occurrences that are forecast, the amount of details grows within our data sets. So 6 or 8 months out, I may have a few words about it. 4 months out, I may have 30 words or 50 words about it. And a month out, I may have 100 words about it. So at this moment, we have long-term data that is showing that we're looking at Zimbabwe kind of hyperinflation some point after summer of 2017.
Well, wouldn't it make more sense, and is this even a possibility, to completely get rid of the current monetary system and do something similar to what Germany did back when they went from a bankrupt nation to a basically super nation again by getting rid of offshore interests that were connected to their monetary system? They started their own monetary system, and they backed that with people there to, you know, go get jobs, go work on the roads, go work on technology and industry.
Yeah, it sort of makes sense, but see, here's a big problem with that, okay? That makes sense then because they were isolated. Germany was operating with a failing currency as a single country surrounded by other countries whose currencies were relatively healthy. So they were able to, there was all kinds of cross-border trade, so they were continuously basically exporting their deflationary environment to the other countries and taking wealth from the other countries as people bought their goods at reduced prices. That can't happen with the dollar situation now because it's not the United States having a failing currency and the Canadian currency and the Mexican currencies being very healthy. It's not going to be that way. What we're going to have here is what's been described in the Austrian School of Economics as a crack-up boom, and we're in that right now. And I know that we're in that right now because the Mexican peso, they upped the rates on the Mexican peso interest rate that they're paying on that by 50 basis points more than had been anticipated by the markets. So the panic is already starting to spread to the other currencies. So you'll see this happen fairly quick where there's going to be currency wars. It's like, oh, you've got some wealth that you want to stash somewhere? Well, come on over to Poland. We're paying 7.5% if you want to put the money in our bank. And then, Lithuania will say, well, we'll pay 7 3/4. And there you go. See, that's the way it starts happening. That's part of the aspect of the crack-up boom. And of course, all of this stuff is going to affect global housing markets and interest rates because they're all tied to the petrodollar. And it is dying. It will not recover. So there won't be a 2009, quote, recovery. Note that this has been the longest recovery, the third longest recovery in the history of the United States dollar period, and that this recovery is the weakest of them all. And also note that when Germany was doing its stuff in the 1920s and 30s to get itself out of the problems of World War I, it was doing so propped up by an American banking system that was funded by Prescott Bush, the Bush clan's granddaddy, and he was financing Hitler. And so Germany actually recovered from their economic problems because of a massive investment by Ford, by all of these companies from the United States through Prescott Bush's efforts into Germany at that time. So they didn't do it on their own. That's kind of like a misunderstanding of what's going to go on. Now, the reason we could do that then was because our dollar had something in it. In 1913, it was created, and it was worth 100 pennies. By 1923, it was worth maybe 96 pennies. Now it's worth 2 pennies. So there's no slack in there. There's no ability to create massive amounts of debt for a major spending infrastructure system. Unless Russia, China, and the Southeast Asian republics start buying into the United States, we are in for a very, very rough, long 10, 20-year period of time to actually physically dig ourselves out of what we're in now. And we even have data to that effect, okay? We've got some data sets that have got a lot more, because of the emotional connection here, because of the way humans feel about the subject, we have a lot more data than we get about other subjects. In other words, if it's a very dry academic subject like, the mating patterns of the such-and-so moth, I just don't get a lot of data about it. But if you've got something that people throw a lot of emotion into, sports, religion, sex, or money, and in this case gold, I get a lot of words about it. So I get a lot more words about gold and silver, not because gold and silver have a lot more chatter or are held by a lot of people. It's just that the people that have them have a very specific level of emotional attachment to them, and that's been the way it's been through history. So we have a tendency to sort of piggyback on that historical attachment to gold and silver. And we've got data now suggesting that the way the United States comes out of this is sort of twofold, okay? There's two halves of it. One half of us coming out of this is that there's going to be a gold rush in the United States. in order to get ourselves right with the world and pay our debts, you're going to see a big chunk of our population that's going to start heading into the hills trying to dig gold out of the place anywhere we can find it. And that's going to be what's going to be required to make us solvent again, so to speak, right? And get us out of this currency hole that I actually cannot find in my mind words to express how my real feelings about the people that are at the top. So we'll just say that we'll just use the word despicable. So the despicable people.
They love you, Cliff.
I know. but the despicable people at the Fed are going to try to do the same kind of things. They're going to do the only thing they know how to do. And our problem is these people have a shovel and they know how to dig a hole, and that's all. So they're going to keep digging, and they don't know how to stop. So they are going to take us into hyperinflation that will create a gold rush in the United States that we've got language that would suggest that sometime in 2017, after we get into the hyperinflationary period, you'll start seeing, even into the mainstream media and newspapers, words and articles and stuff about the gold rush that will hearken us back to 1845 California and the language that was written about the gold rush in the 1800s in California, as well as the one in the Yukon. We're going to see that same kind of language all over again as the United States becomes desperate for real stuff to pay its debt and buy oil and other energy. Now, here's the goofy part of all of this, okay? The other aspect of this is, the other half of us getting out of this is an innovation wave is coming. This innovation wave is actually already starting now, and started maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. And it has to do with 5 billion humans getting onto the internet that are not on there now. And these are all people in non-dollar denominated regions for the most part, or non-dollar dominated. And so because they don't live under the auspices of the powers that be in our officialdom, these people are coming in without any of the limitations or preconceptions that we've ever run across. And so we're going to see innovation that's been suppressed by the dollar having its woes. We should be in one now, by the way. We should be in about 12 years into a 25-year period of a renaissance. And it's been held at bay because of the powers that be in the U.S. trying to maintain the status quo and not allow change. And that change always precedes and boosts the renaissance. So because it's been delayed, I think we'll still complete about the same 12 or 15-year period we have left, but I think we're going to cram in tons of stuff in that period of time. And these 5 billion people that are going to come online are going to, in our data sets, showing up as being combinoric, in the sense that one guy's going to have a good idea, he'll tell somebody about it online because he's not trapped in a paradigm where he thinks he's got to go patent it or keep it secret. That idea will feed another idea, and there you go, the whole open source concept expressed across a good portion of humanity trying to solve problems. And so the innovation wave has been described in our data sets for maybe 11 or 12 years now, and we're really starting to get into it. The USA is not going to participate. We're not going to be leaders in this. We're going to be followers because of our own problems here. But that innovation wave will help us get out.
And there will still be pockets, right, I'm sure, here in the U.S. that are just as innovative as the guys overseas or in other locations. It's just going to be less.
Certainly, exactly.
So let me ask you this then as well. With Trump being the next president, do you think that he might be getting set up for the downfall, essentially?
No, it doesn't make any difference. No, I don't believe he was set up. I think these people, it's actually my opinion that Trump was chosen as the chump by the Democrats, okay, that they did everything they could to make sure that he was the one that they had to face, and they're just floored that they lost. The powers that be at that top level, right? Everybody else is a good party faithful and believe the party line and so on, and they weren't part of the machinations going on at the top here. But the reason that they did that was that these guys it's twofold. They thought they could avoid what we're going to face. These guys thought they could go another 8 years and not have any change. And the reason that they don't want that change is because as the dollar degrades over time in its purchasing power, the ability it's going to sound stupid, but the ability to use it as a method of bribery is reduced. And unless they bribe millions of people constantly, it all falls apart, all their secrets come on out, we see how evil they are, and there's a political revolution here in the country. Now, I'm not talking about Trump. Trump was indeed a political revolution, but he is not, or maybe we can describe him as a rebellion. Okay, a rebellion is where you just get pissed at the people at the top, but you're okay with the system, right? You just need some tweaks and you're going to fix it. And so Trump is a political rebellion. But the people at the top, if they were exposed, so if you knew, for instance, that every single person that was in an appointed office in the federal government and every single person that was in an appointed office in any of the state governments that had been appointed in the last 15 years was had an odds-on, in other words, you had the ability to say there's a 50% chance that anybody that's been appointed to a political office in the last 15, 20 years is a pedophile, okay, is an egregious pedophile and may even be a murderer. If you knew that half of all these people were in fact actively engaged in such things, then how could you possibly vote for them? A lot of people would deny that and so on, and they'd put up a wall of denial and they'd go ahead and vote on it. But the problem is the ability to keep those things secret is entirely based on the petrodollar, and it's dying. And these people know that. They know that they're facing these terrible, terrible times. And that's why they're trying to create all these slush funds to keep everybody bribed. And you'll notice within 24 hours of Hillary losing, Norway canceled 97% of its contributions to the Clinton Global Charity Fund slush fund for use for bribery. And that within that same 24 hours, there were 4 other non-governmental or non-sovereign organizations that canceled 100% of their, quote, donations. So those were not donations. Those were tribute. And they were basically told, we're going to be president. You give us money now, and we'll go easy on you. Or you don't, and we'll come and take your country later on. And so that was the mechanism that was being operated in this whole CGI thing, the Clinton Global Initiative. And it's not a charity thing. They paid out less than 0.5% of all the funds come on in that were allocated explicitly to charity. So in other words, they stole 95 or 99.5% of the money that said, give this to the people in Haiti that suffered that great earthquake. And they stole all that money and didn't give it to Haiti. And Haiti's really pissed about it. And they found out about it. And they're making a big brouhaha and upset about it in the global community, trying to break through the bribery wall that keeps these people safe. And they know that they cannot go quietly into the night. Okay, all this stuff's going to come on out. Once the bribery's done, once your ability to pay people to kill other people to keep things silent is gone, then it all does come out. And under those circumstances, the evil that is I'm not talking Democrats and I'm not talking Republicans. I'm talking about the people that are, Republican in name only and Democrat in name only, but are really power elite people. All of those are the guys that are really worried. And so they're trying all these mechanisms to get this, to stop a political revolution.
With that going on, it certainly seems like at any moment, who knows what's going to happen, essentially, because it could be Germany, it could be France, it could be here. There's just so much going on. And then if you look at Syria, Damascus, and, that place is just in ruins. We don't hear much about that here at home. We're definitely living in fascinating times. And I want to kind of shift gears for just a second before I forget about this, because you're very knowledgeable in this area. And I was driving yesterday looking at the sun through the clouds, and it looked like the moon almost because of these fake clouds that are created from these chemical trails that dissipate. You'll see these, and the skies aren't even blue anymore, even when they are blue. They're not like the aqua deep blue that they used to be. It's almost like this metallic, very strange. It's like I wonder if all these nanoparticulates, aluminum, and everything that they've sprayed into the atmosphere has created some type of reflective or holographic opportunity for these guys. I don't know. But regardless, I'm looking at the sun as I'm driving through the clouds, and I'm thinking of myself for the movie Highlander 2, The Quickening, when, if you remember that film, they had to create this fake atmosphere because they destroyed it. So
yeah, I hadn't seen the film, but that's basically what's sort of going on.
Yeah,
they are actually destroying. Right, and there's the thing, Guy. Chemtrails are not truly global. There are a lot of areas on the planet that they don't bother to do. So there may be layers upon layers upon layers of an agenda here. In other words, some people that are may be spraying the chemtrails thinking they are going globally and that it's a thing to reflect the new high energies coming in from the sun. Okay. Other people may be aware that they're actually spraying these things so that they can use electromagnetic radiation to try and do mind control on the cities under which they're spraying. Okay. So who knows what
could be all of the above, right?
Correct, exactly. All of the agendas may indeed be operating. But here's a couple of facts for you. Even if they didn't do the chemtrails, we wouldn't have blue skies the way we did anymore. The top of the Earth's atmosphere was ripped off. This was back in 2003 by the same burst that caused the Banda Aceh quake and killed 200,000 people, more than 200,000 people. At the time that happened, like the top maybe, let's just pick a number and say 6%, the very wispy part of the atmosphere is gone. And that was the part that really created the deep blue. It was our transition into the other colors of space. So it's a weird time. There's no question about it. Everything's coming. Well, we're coming into what's been called the age of Aquarius, right? Mm-hmm. And as we move into these ages, each of these precessional ages last for years, and it takes us a long time to make a transition. Even a single degree of movement in a precessional arc is going to take 72 years. So moving in from 1 degree to a next, it really is a big transit. We're almost through with this transit into the official Aquarian age, which is all about the knowledge bearer and so on. So a lot of this stuff is all coming out. And you'll notice in a sort of a curious flip to that, we've got all of the old knowledge being questioned. And this is a good thing, this we are change within our understanding of what academia has been spoon-feeding us. So, for instance, we now know that when the astronauts go into space, they can't see the sun or the fixed stars. The sun is not visible in space. The only way it becomes visible is if you put microfine little scratches in a grid pattern in your acrylic window and cause a particular kind of light interaction. So we now know that the sun is not as we've been told. It's not a nuclear furnace. It burns nothing. It's not even really a source of light. If anything, it's nothing more than a reflector. And that's true of all the what we call the stars, all the fixed stars. When you get out into space, you can see the planets, you can see the moon, you can see anything that reflects light. And in fact, when you're down here on Earth, if you examine the idea, you cannot see any light source. You never get to see a light bulb. You don't get to see the light emerging out of the light bulb. What you see is the reflection of that light on a glass surface. So our understanding of the basic elements of reality is twisted, and it's been twisted probably quite deliberately by these guys, but also because they're ignorant. They don't understand a lot of this stuff themselves. And there's been a lot of stuff that's been hidden from them. So, for instance, you get a lot of people that will say, oh, XYZ theory is correct, something we've had for a long time. Let's pick one. Oh, Darwin. Okay, Darwin's got a good theory about evolution, right? And so everybody says, well, it's all settled, we know the dinosaurs died, blah, 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 and, it's all due to evolution. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, Darwin's theory is good, but Darwin in his theory did not acknowledge nor even speculate about much of reality. So his theory has to be kind of like chucked out the window. I'm not saying that, there is a God that comes around and creates things, but I'm saying that his approach to this does not acknowledge space aliens, does not acknowledge the true history of humanity, and is piggybacked on, all of Darwin's work, by the way, is entirely piggybacked on the Judeo-Christian concept of creation. If you eliminate that underpinning, then, that X number of years ago the Earth was created, X number of years after that there was a volcanic period, X number of years after that we got water, all of this kind of stuff. All of that, basically all of that creation understanding extracted from the Judeo-Christian concept, monotheistic concept, is not valid. We don't know that any of that stuff ever occurred. I'm not saying the Earth was created whole with trees on it or anything at all like that. I'm just saying that the progression that we've been told by academia all of our lives is not valid and has as much validity as the idea that you can see the sun and space and stars, which is not true. And so here we are at a point in the Aquarian age manifesting when all kinds of stuff is being questioned. You got people out there saying the Earth is flat, that you could actually walk, if you knew the way to go, you could walk across the Earth onto this other part of the flat plane and walk over to Mars. And if you could do it, you could walk to the moon. And so you got people questioning everything. And this, I think, is a good thing, simply because academia is so basically full of shit. And they've had us all boxed in their little boxes all these years. This innovation wave, getting back to that for a moment, is going to come out of all of these people questioning all of this stuff and finding out real stuff about reality that will then be piggybacked on by other people to make our lives better in the future over the course of these next 10 or 15 years. So, for instance, now we're at a point where in our last report there were I want to say 20 or 30 instances. I don't know how many because I didn't count them, but 20 or 30 instances that I had to write about Antarctica. And Antarctica pops up all the time. It was in the very first reports I started doing in 1997. The first runs I was doing. I didn't write them up and tell anybody about it. I just was investigating this whole thing. But Antarctica showed up back then. It keeps popping up with some huge levels of emotional attachment that make no sense. You know, why does anybody have any emotional attachment to Antarctica that has never been there? And there's so few people that have ever been there, it should not even show up in my data at all. Except that, of course, it's also really weird. And now we know that, you know, everything we've been told about Antarctica, except for the fact that there's ice on it, is probably bogus. We now know, for instance, that there's at least 80 identified rivers and tributaries to those rivers underneath Antarctica that are in the 60 degrees Fahrenheit range, that are continually carving out the ice underneath the continent, that these rivers are heated by something that's coming up out of the continent, that in some of these rivers there are tunnels over them, that you could stack 4 Eiffel Towers, one on top of each other, and still have room at the top to stand up there and wave your hands and not hit the top of this tunnel. We know that there's air masses that are trapped over lakes in Antarctica in the ice, and the air masses are 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. So, and now it kind of starts making some sense as we find out that, oh, there's pyramids down there. There's ancient civilizations down there. The leaks are starting to show up. And, of course, at the same time the leaks are showing up and there's more chatter about this, we also see that Obama made a secret trip. Both popes have been down there. John Kerry went down there on the day of the election, and he spent more money and created more carbon dioxide getting down there for his, quote, climate study or climate change study. He created more carbon dioxide going down there for that one trip than all of the United States creates in a week. So, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, you're real concerned with climate. You're going to go ahead and create more CO2 than the whole country.
How did they do
just
that?
So you can go look at, I mean, just the airplanes and stuff and everything that had to go on to get him down there and back in that period of time, because they had to fly against basically bad timing, bad weather, and avoid. It was a special trip just for him. It takes a lot of energy and stuff to get a person, and this was it. I don't know how many planes were involved, how many people were involved, but the expense involved kind of rivals what Obama does with Air Force One. And they did this just so John Kerry could go down by his own admission to look at ice. That makes no sense at all. They're not even trying to come up with the cover stories anymore.
Well, what about Buzz Aldrin, too?
I was just going to say, at the same time, we've had Buzz Aldrin, and now bear in mind, this man is 86 years old, and he's in good shape, but he's still 86 years old.
Right.
So how often are we hauling 86-year-old people down to the South Pole? And this is not just Antarctica. This is not McMurdo Base within 34 kilometers of the coastline. This is the middle of the continent. This is the South Pole. So he went deep into the continent for some reason. And it's kind of like, I don't think that it was a case of him paying for it with celebrity. It's my opinion that someone requested that he do that, and I don't know why. Any speculation as to what the request or who it came from even would be just speculation. But we do have the facts. He went down there and he suffered.
Maybe it was somebody from Antarctica that said, "Hey, we want to talk to Buzz. Get him over here."
I was thinking the other way. Okay. Because Buzz Aldrin is one of those guys, if you look, he's had a big career as an outspoken person after being an astronaut. And one of the things he's outspoken about is getting humanity out and about and this kind of thing. Now, you could also speculate and say, well, maybe whoever it was that asked for Buzz Aldrin to be down there needed him down there because maybe he was like an ambassador. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe he'd met somebody out in space and they said, well, you know, we need somebody we can trust. Get Buzz down here to talk to us. That kind of thing. I'm not saying that occurred, but it is reasonable speculation given all the other weird stuff that's going on down there.
Absolutely.
But, okay, now here's something else we're getting in some of our new data sets here. So follow along with me on this. We had 30, 40, I don't know how many instances of Antarctica show up in the last report. In the report before that, it started swelling. There was a lot more Antarctica data. Now I've got tons of stuff coming in from Antarctica. I don't know. I'm going to just have to really sit on it and try and control it so it doesn't dominate this next report I'm going to release at the end of the month. But there's some really interesting stuff coming out of here within the Antarctica stuff that's sort of joining with this whole innovation wave, because there's data now referring to Antarctica as the source of wealth, the source of a boom, a giant humanity-wide economic boom, and the source of what the data is calling precious technology. Now, this is interesting because the word precious in this sense has exactly the same emotive characteristics as the word precious when used with precious metals to indicate gold and silver, and the iridium, platinum group, but primarily gold and silver. So we're not getting the precious technologies, meaning that it's going to be technology that involves gold and silver, but technologies that will be as precious as gold and silver, and they're related to solving finally, although it's probably going to take decades and decades, but they're going to solve our energy problem, at least according to our data sets. So theoretically, in my interpretation of what's coming across in the data as of this point, we're going to hit an innovation wave that will propel part of humanity down to Antarctica in a way we've never seen before, outside of what the Germans did at the end of World War II. And the Germans may still be there for all we know, right? They're living in these giant caverns. We would never have a clue. You can't even see through the ice without all of the, ground penetrating radar and stuff. And that's what finally took for us to find out that there are these tunnels that go for thousands of miles underneath the ice that are, quarter or I think it was 2¼ miles at its narrowest. It was 2¼ miles wide and on the order of hundreds of meters tall, and it was 70 and 80 degrees in there. So, a very hospitable climate considering the ice. You're out of all the cold and all of this kind of stuff. So anyway, the innovation showing up as picking up the Antarctica stuff and actually propelling it into our near-term future. So this is going to be cool as hell in my way of thinking. It's very much, in the space goat farts realm at this point, but we're starting to get pictures that come out of the pyramids in Antarctica. We're starting to get all the rumors of ancient civilizations down there being excavated and so on. And so there's certain specific language I'm looking for, but I'm actually very hopeful. And it has nothing to do with Trump, because Trump is without the innovation wave, absent some external situation change, the dollar is doomed, and the U.S. is going to have a 10 to 20-year period of time that will resemble what Russia went through as the Soviet Union broke up and it had to reconstitute itself and rebuild itself. And that will not be an easy time for us in the United States, because we're not as well situated as Russia when it went through that. We don't have vast amounts of oil and gas. We don't have a situation where people didn't lose their houses. No one in Russia lost their house when their system collapsed because the state owned them all. Here we've got a situation where, the banks own everything, and the Federal Reserve claims to own 89% of all the mortgages in the United States. So if we can get rid of the Federal Reserve, well, maybe all those 89% of all the mortgages simply disappear and we'll be that much better off. We don't need to owe the Federal Reserve any money. We don't need to have a national debt. The national debt is not our deficit. It's not our trade deficit. It's what we theoretically or hypothetically owe the Federal Reserve for creating money that we then borrow from them at interest. And it's like, that's bogus. Let Congress create money out of gold and silver, and we don't need the Federal Reserve at all. And these days, you could do it even electronically. You could have micro payments in gold and silver digitally done, and it's quite trivial. It's on the order. Well, it's been accomplished already with Bitcoin. We just have to piggyback on that technology. So our situation is hopeful, and there's a lot of openings and stuff here. And I think it's all cracked. I think we're in that crack-up boom, and the bad guys are going to the power elite are going to start withering, and we'll be able to break out of this constraint that has got, a whole generation living in their parents' basements and a whole generation without skills, having gone through a terrible schooling system that provides them with all kinds of self-esteem, but not the ability to tie their shoes except in one form of a knot. And basically, they probably can't even tie their shoes because they've been given Velcro. So they're lacking all these kinds of skills. And we see this affecting our national health at the moment in the sense of economic. How can we possibly compete with China, Russia, India, or Indonesia when they graduate, just as an example, 1 million engineers for every lawyer, and we graduate 1 million lawyers and 1 engineer? It just is not going to happen. So the United States has to redo itself. Trump is the visible face of that, and but in my opinion, it wouldn't have mattered if Trump had not run. There would have been someone else that would have been the populist face that would have taken over, and we'll be on to this path.
Let me jump in real quick if I
Sure.
can. I have a friend and somebody that's actually going to be coming on the show next week that does these Vedic star charts, and she has to have your exact date of birth, where you were born, etc. And there's all these different alignments with the stars. Now, I used to be a lot more skeptical than I am now, and I'm still neutral on a lot of things, and I take everything with a grain of salt, of course. But I do see the accuracy with this Vedic or these old school type astrology charts versus the Western type charts, and it just blew me away when she read my chart and other people's charts, and then she said that Trump's chart was like phenomenal, and that what she sees him doing just based on the star chart is incredible. So, I don't know, man. I mean, it certainly, it seems to me like the as above, so below statement has so many different meanings, not just metaphysical, but also if you look at it scientific. And I wonder sometimes if the signs in the heavens, what we see in the stars, are a micro, essentially, thing here that happens. So the same thing, like a reflection, if we're all in this together. And one thing that I do notice, I'm looking at the tweet that Buzz sent that immediately got deleted on Twitter. It says, "We are all in danger. It is evil itself." And
I think that's bogus, though.
You think, okay, maybe it's bogus. It certainly could be.
I've never been able to find anything in his timeline that was deleted about that time, so I can't validate that, in fact, he sent that.
You certainly could be right. There's a lot of things that can be done. If it was legit, that's fascinating. If not, just another diversion tactic, wag the dog type scenario. Let's sell more T-shirts and cause more confusion. But one thing that I was hoping we could talk about, Cliff, because I used to hear you discuss this a lot more back in, I would say, 2011, 2010. You talk about the people or the things that control the world overall, that have the majority of the power, the influence. There's 6 corporations that control over 90% of the media. There's 6 corporations that control over 90% of what kids see in school and learn about, and the textbooks, etc. So it's a very small group at the top that seems to influence things overall. Hollywood is a very powerful tool. If you know what it's doing to your subconscious, I think you can use it against them more than them using it against you, yet it's still like MKUltra at its finest. You talk about UFOs, CIA. I used to hear you talk a lot more about the extraterrestrial phenomena, and I think that it's kind of turned into something that's not necessarily taboo, but it's been mocked a lot, and it seems like there's a lot of misinformation. Even a lot of big players out there are saying, in the alternative communities are saying, oh, I don't think UFOs are real. I don't think aliens are real. I personally firmly believe that there is an extraterrestrial presence out there. Can I prove it without a shadow of a doubt? No. I'm going to say that's my opinion. Yet I've got a pretty
well, no,
good
actually,
intuition
there's
on this.
Okay, you could prove it. Sorry to interrupt. You could prove it. I wouldn't say beyond a shadow of a doubt, because that implies that that's actually basically insisting that you overcome doubt in someone's mind, and I would actually never say overcome all doubt. Always keep doubt. It's what keeps a human sane. But there's a lot of things you can see that prove this. For instance, you can look at it at a macro level. Here you've got the planet Earth and 85% of the non-plant life. Okay, so 85% of the life on this planet that is not a plant is not like humans, and it's not like anything that is like humans. That is to say, 85% of the life on this planet does not have a spine. Now, a lot of people would say, well, spines evolved. It's a evolutionary process and stuff. And I can say, if you actually look at the vertebrate versus the invertebrate distribution and so on, you can say, because of the way that it lays out, there is a certain suspicion that vertebrate, the idea, the concept of spines and so forth, were brought to this planet. Okay, didn't really evolve as we understand it. So there is evidence all the time, and now we've got tons of evidence that space aliens exist here on, or had existed here on this planet, in the sense of prior civilizations that were not necessarily human, or not necessarily our kind of human. They may have been hominid, that have been here on this planet. And we have huge giant traces of these guys left all over. And that is our monolithic period, the pyramids, Anwar or Angkor Wat, the giant megalithic structures in Lebanon and Syria, all of these kind of things, right? So now we know, because we can speculate, I mean, it's not 100% proven, but it's like 99%. We can speculate in that last 1% that there was never a pharaoh that built any of the pyramids that we see as pyramids. Yes, there were pharaohs that built some of the broken pyramids, the staggered pyramids, and the mud pyramids. And these were guys trying to duplicate an already existing technology and prove themselves that they were as great as their ancestors, because they assumed that their ancestors built them. But no pharaoh built any pyramid. No Jew was a slave working on a pyramid. There were never any Jewish engineers that built anything at Giza. And all of this is basically bogus. So that entire, the fundamental history of the Western construct as is delivered to us by our schooling system, especially here in the United States, is bogus. And so now we've got to go back and root out all the real stuff that's underneath that. And you're going to find those aliens. They're everywhere. By the way, we just had an instance of that pop up. The 70 metallic books, really codices, that were discovered in Jordan about, 8, 10, 12 years ago, have been validated. These metallic books are made out of lead. The lead pages are actually decaying at an atomic rate. They can't be duplicated, can't be hoaxed. So it's not like you can put baking soda on them as you would on copper to get it to age with a little vinegar and put a patina on it. You can't do that on a molecular level in lead. So they're able to identify these lead sheets as going back between 1800 and 2000 years ago. And they're saying now, give us another 10 years and we'll get you down to the exact year. Another 10 years after that, we could be able to tell you what week they were actually hammered out in. And because of the radioactive decay component of it all, and the fact that lead back then doesn't have the same radioactivity as lead today, simply because of all the nuclear bombs and stuff that were detonated in our testing period has permeated a lot of the minerals in the planet with radioactivity, because it's now in a much more distributed fashion than it was 2,000 years ago. Anyway, the point of all of this is these tablets have the first historical mention of Jesus. They've got a crude portrait of him. Doesn't look anything like what we've got now. And they say Jesus wasn't out to create a religion. He was really upset because the existing powers that be at that time had had a soft coup and taken over Judaism, thrown out its original god, and set up Odonai, a male god, in that original god's place, and had invented all these rules and stuff. So Jesus' crime was that he was against Hebrew revisionism, against the Talmud and the Torah, because they were bogus, based on bad information, and that Jesus was saying we should all go back to the original God of the Proto-Hebrews that was over 1,000 years old and was a male and female figure. Now, here's the interesting part of that. While there are people that will claim that Baal and some of the other Middle Eastern gods were both male and female, what was the weird one? Bahoptet, the goat-headed god that's got breasts and stuff.
Oh, yeah, Baphomet.
Yeah, exactly. So there you have all of these images of these male and female gods, and they're all about 1,000 years old. That's not what is being discussed in these tablets. It's not Jesus saying, well, let's go back and worship this goat guy with the big breasts. No, what Jesus is talking about, or what the books say that this individual called Jesus was talking about, was to overthrow the entire rabbinical structure of the Judaic religion, because they had abandoned the original God that was a female that could choose to turn itself into a male in order to for procreation, and that these were space aliens that came here and created our DNA. And this is in these tablets, and there's 70 of them, of these books, of these codices, and they've been validated as being historically accurate, and now the language is being translated. The language is validated as not being any kind of a modern copy. It is the Proto-Hebrew, pretty exact. I haven't found any single instances anywhere of the discussions of it that show even a single symbol that's out of place. So,
do you remember the name of the codex, Cliff? Sorry to interrupt.
No, there's 70 of them, 70. So they're individually coded. They're individual codices. Okay, so they're named in various different ways. You can look it up. You can just say metallic tablets Jordan in a Google search, and that would probably get you close enough to start picking up instances of it. And it's going to be out all over. Now, we've got weird stuff in our data sets that we've had since 1997 that said religion was going to die, that in my lifetime, that I would witness the death of organized religion. And I think we're there now. Because if we acknowledge that the tablets, or the codices here, the metallic lead tablets, were accurate, then it puts an entirely different slant on what we've been told is the roots of monotheism. And if we also acknowledge that the pyramids they're finding in Antarctica are bigger, more massive, and older than anything found anywhere else on the planet, but are exact to the angle of 51 degrees and all of this kind of stuff, is where we find in all the pyramids in Mesoamerica, in Bosnia, in Egypt, and in Thailand, and all these other places, then we have to say, well, the pyramids existed before modern humanity, so who built them? And here we are into our total age of Aquarius, where everything that we thought we knew has to be unlearned.
Right, and then also when you look at some of the stuff that goes on in the pharmaceutical industries, the medical industry, the food industry. It seems like it's just so much poison, and it's like strategic sweet poisons that they put in the food supply, the beverages, etc. And then when you really get into the vaccine agenda and you read each individual insert, what they're putting in these vaccines, I've noticed that some of them now have aborted baby cells, essentially. And
some of them have sweeteners. Some of them have sweeteners.
Oh, yeah, you've got to put aspartame in there, right?
In a vaccine.
Oh, you've got to have aspartame in the vaccine. I mean, you're putting it directly into the bloodstream, and add some formaldehyde to that and some glyphosate and some other wonderful substances. And then when people are so conditioned because of the teachings that they've had on the polio vaccine, or, you know, we got rid of polio, it got rid of measles.
No, see, that's so bogus. That one always irritates me, right?
Right.
I always have to object, because polio was already dying by the time they introduced the Salk vaccine. And the Salk vaccine cannot be proven to, in any single case, to actually be an effective vaccination against polio.
Well, they did prove that it had cancer cells in it.
Correct, yes. Actually, I was going to say, but you can prove that it causes all kinds of side effects, including, paralysis and all this other sort of thing that mimic the polio itself. But in any event, though, here, let's stop for a real quick second and go into something that's really important for all the people listening to this. And that has to do with the food body of the planet and mind control. The CIA has this saying, willpower lasts as long as the calories in your body and the sleep in your system, and that they can break anybody just by waiting out the ability of the body to supply itself with energy. And so they know that that there's not a mind on the planet that can resist their mind control techniques if they concentrate on the body itself. And that's been taken to a very, as you point out, with all of the other, the sweeteners, which is actually trying to get people hooked into a particular mental cycle, which is this honey-seeking behavior that we all have built into our body. But we only need to find sweets once a year to satisfy our needs, and that's actually why sweets were the traditional gift in Christmas at for the Northern Hemisphere, was to not only give you calories, but to provide that spark, if you will, in the midst of the very dark period of time for the weather. However, my point of saying all of this is we've got to get our minerals adjusted, and that's one of the things that the powers that be are really working on with all of their pharmaceuticals and everything, is they're playing against the fact that very few people on the planet here have an effective food source that provides them with the minerals they need. And so if you go to the store and look at a big pharma offering for a mineral supplement, you'll find that there's iron, magnesium, and a couple of others. You need to have minerals on the order of 70 and 90 of these trace minerals. These are not found in your food anymore because of our agricultural practices for these past centuries. They used to be found in our food up to the point that we stopped growing all of our own food and putting our wood ash from our cooking fires into the food to provide the minerals back into the vegetables and so forth. We don't have those anymore. So we have all of these diseases, metabolic syndrome, probably diabetes to a great extent, paralysis, all of these kind of things are all deficiency diseases, which is very hard to get academic doctors to understand. It took years, decades for doctors to understand that scurvy could be cured by lemons. They thought it was some kind of a systemic disease that you got from sailing over the water. All of these rickets, cured by vitamin D. All of these kind of deficiency diseases are very hard to get across, but we are probably all suffering them to a great degree if you're not actively supplementing with these 70 and 90 minerals. The complete fulvic, F-U-L-V-I-C minerals that give you the 60 to 70 that you basically really need, and then if you get 90, you're really, really cooking along just fine. And so once you start getting some of these things into your system, you become personally less susceptible to this stuff, and you're no longer a magnification of the problem. You're now starting to be a part of the solution. So I'm really going to start in the future. Actually, I'm going to, as you point out, getting back to your previous point, I'm going to start talking a whole lot more about aliens because there's a lot more of it in the data, and because we're now going to have to face it in an open fashion. What's really in the last 6 years been driving me away from that has been the total degradation of the dollar system and the petrodollar and the geopolitical consequences that could have existed from that. If Trump had not come in, I would personally, at this stage, be actively attempting to find some place where it might be safe from a nuclear war, because the power elite were so intent on preserving themselves by attacking Russia. And that may have now, it is slacked off, okay? There's no longer that pressure quite so much saying we're going to go towards a nuclear war. And in fact, Russia doesn't want it, and Russia never hacked us. You go read the Russian literature; they're over there just laughing at all the stuff that the powers that be here are saying about them. It's all bogus. It's all not true. And the Russians, but the Russians are very paranoid because they know our power elite has the intent to coerce all of the United States citizens to hate Russia and attack them and dominate the planet. And so Russia has every right to be really paranoid about this and to develop their defenses and so on, because you've got our power elite, Hillary and Obama, saying, we're going to attack you, you're bad guys, and all of this kind of stuff. And I wouldn't disbelieve them. If I had Hillary or Obama or any of those people say they were after me, I would take it very seriously. They have people killed for the weirdest kind of things. The rumors about Joan Rivers being killed because she outed Michael Obama as being a transgender.
It was weird how she died in a surgery very shortly after she came out with that public.
You got it. Yep. So, and the whole thing, I mean, it's all conspiracies, but it's no longer conspiracy theory. It's conspiracy fact. And it's a matter of, okay, if you're unwilling to open your eyes and you're unwilling to see, that's fine. I don't demand that you go through the life the way I do. And it is true. There are people that can see things on their own. There's people that can see things when, they're pointed out, and then there's those people that refuse to see them. This is not my saying. This is Leonardo da Vinci that pointed this out. But we're at that stage now where it's all busting open. No, I don't think that we live on a flat Earth. I can prove that in any number of different ways, that we are indeed on a sphere. But that aside, I like and welcome the guys with the flat Earth queries that are saying, hey, this could be true because I can't validate this. So anybody that's willing to question anything and going out and do the work and the experiments on their own, as opposed to just saying, oh, I think that's bogus and I don't have any real reason for it. Hey, I'm all in favor of an active skeptic, and it looks like we're going to be into the skeptics rule for the next 10 or 15 years as all this stuff comes on out. And you have no idea as the amount of emotional intensity that I'm getting on the stuff that's coming out of Antarctica. It's so big. Relative to everything else we've had, it will dominate the petrodollar. It will dominate the idea of World War III, just totally do away with all these kind of things in the next few years as all this stuff comes on out. And I actually had to label it as the discovery, because in my lifetime, what's going to come out of Antarctica will be a bigger discovery than nuclear weapons. It'll be a bigger discovery than electricity, than the automobile, any of that kind of stuff.
Now, what is that going to be?
I don't have a clue. It hasn't been found yet. We're not that clear. Now, I do have clues. Okay, I have little tiny hints here and there, and I put out some of it in our reports as the language gets more filled in. So I do know that some of this stuff, the precious technologies, is going to be energy related. I've got some language about what I'm calling creeping electricity. And by creeping, I mean, imagine you lived in a stone house and you wanted to plug in your microwave, okay? And in this kind of a description that we're getting out of the data, you would just go on over and use your fingers or some means and designate this part of the wall as where you want that electricity to appear, and you put your plug from your microwave at that point of the wall, and the wall would obligingly provide the electricity. So it's a different way of dealing with things that we have now.
And also, I know this is a little bit off topic, but I don't know if your Alta reports have ever picked up anything on this. Now, there's been multiple studies on what's in hamburgers, hot dogs, and Clear Labs has done multiple studies on different hamburgers, etc. Now, this is an article I want to just read from Yahoo real quick. They found human DNA in hot dogs. And they found human DNA in hamburgers. And even grosser, it says here, this is I quote from the Yahoo article, even grosser, 2% of all samples were found to have traces of human DNA in them. Veggie dogs were the worst off, accounting for 67% of the hygiene issues. Now, when they say hygiene issues, I like how they use that term, hygiene issues. Essentially, it's human DNA. Now, is this Soylent Green?
Well, wait a second, though. Okay, let's clarify that for your listeners, though. That does not mean that someone is scraping off human flesh and putting it into the machine and grinding it up to put it in a hot dog. That human DNA could be as simple as someone that had a drop of sweat fall into that hot dog. You can get human DNA out of sweat. You can get it out of hair. So, see, it's not necessarily anything more than simply ineffective control of contaminants in your food supply.
So you don't think it's Soylent Green?
No, I do not. And the reason I don't think that is because
Sweet.
if you examine the largest vegetarian society on the planet, which is the Hindu at the moment, there's 1.3 billion people that are basically vegetarian, and you will find that these people are constantly consuming non-vegetarian protein in the form of basically insect parts. And so even in their society, where they're vegetarian and it's religious driven, and they're really, as we shall say, fanatic, and that's where the term comes from, religion, they're fanatic about it, even they have contamination issues that provide them with a certain amount of protein in their diet that is we can say, animal-based, but it's really from insects. So that level of contamination happens continuously. So you say human DNA is in a hot dog, that's fine, okay, but how much DNA, what is the DNA referencing in terms of, what kind of flesh did it come from, et cetera? Because, here's the situation. When I was a kid and I first started off, I was working at a sawmill. I had an accident with one of the saw blades, wrapped up my hand, and continued working. And over the course of the day, my DNA was contaminating the wood products I was cutting, as I was occasionally getting little drops of blood on it. See, so that kind of thing happens all the time. Now, there, it didn't matter, right? They would be really pissed off if you bled all over their wood. But the kind of stuff I was doing, the little tiny bit of blood here and there, wouldn't have affected it. But had you actually sampled that, you would have found human DNA in it.
Now, that makes sense, too, and that could certainly get rid of a lot of the conspiracy theories on that. I've often wondered think about all these people that end up missing every single year, no trace ever.
No, I'm not saying that stuff does not occur. I'm not in any way denigrating any of that, and there's a whole lot of stuff that says there's a whole lot of circumstantial evidence that can be found in videos, photographs, and I'm not talking someone else's opinion. I'm talking evidence that you could go and look at and form your own opinion in the form of photographs of people and videos of them acting or out and about doing stuff. And you could look at these videos, and if you were knowledgeable, you could say, there seems to be some suggestion that these people have consumed human flesh. The reason that I say that is because these people are exhibiting the characteristics that cannibals always have, and it relates to what we might think of as like Parkinsonian kind of symptoms. So you could indeed say that there is cannibalism going on. Now, that aside, leaving the cannibalistic part of it out, okay, we also know especially from all of the recent Pizzagate revelations, that there's a huge amount of people disappearing, primarily children, that are being taken, abducted, tortured, killed, and destroyed. Now, do I think they're putting them in hot dogs to get rid of them? No. Would I think that they would do that? Sure, these guys are quite evil, and they would do that because these are the same people that have you consume stannous fluoride, which is for your teeth, supposedly, for your bones, supposedly, which is actually a byproduct of the steel industry and is terribly toxic. And it was just an easy way to get rid of it. These are the same people that are spraying the fly ash from all the coal plants in a slurry form into the chemtrails to get rid of it. They don't have to spend $1 billion a year to store the stuff anymore, and they just spray it all over the planet. So these people would certainly go to the trouble of throwing bodies into meat grinders just to get rid of them and to not have any traces come back to them. I don't think they're doing that. I don't have any reason to suspect that. I would think that you would have a lot more indications of human DNA and other things in there than if you did that. But I do know that these individuals are indeed pedophiles. I know that the pedophilia networks are extensive. I know that the pedophilia networks are within the power elite at a level that means we must remove the power elite in order to get rid of the pedophiles. This is not a situation where we can swap out a new leader for the old leader because the system is so corrupt. This is why, even though I think very highly of the information that is contained and passed along in Freemasonry, I would never, ever, ever join a Freemason lodge because they're already tainted with the pedophiles. That's where they came up from. And so Freemasonry itself, the lodges, the whole structure, is a supporting platform for the secrecy that goes into supporting the pedophiles. The pedophiles have also been able to insert themselves into the corporate structure and hierarchy that is part of the control structure for our current technological society, as well as for the deep, dark, live-in-the-ground, back engineer the space alien kind of stuff guys. So the pedophiles are controlling all of this network at all these different levels. Thus, I'm very hopeful that as the outrage comes out and all this other new information comes out because the dollar is breaking down and people can't be bribed effectively anymore, that will be able to shake loose some of the control structure and break out some of the technology that we already have, that we don't have to, say, reverse engineer from what we're going to find in Antarctica. We've already got floaty triangle ships, right, that built by Lockheed Martin or whoever, that live in holes in the ground in Texas and Arizona and this kind of thing, or when they're not flying about. So all these things exist. I've actually got third-generation night vision goggles, and I've seen these spaceships out flying around.
You used to talk about that a lot.
There's no point in it anymore. I mean, you can, but I had to go on to other things. I'm not a researcher, okay? This is my failing. Way back when, back in the late 80s, when I first started getting into my own awakening, I thought, oh, okay, I will discard my idea of a current career and I'll go in and do research on all of this stuff. But the problem, my mind is not so well tuned to doing the detail work for that kind of stuff and passing it on in an informative kind of a fashion. Once I've digested an idea or concept enough to get the basic understanding of where it fits into things, then I go on to the next thing. So, and in the work I'm doing now, I allow the data to basically drive what I look at, and it's been very productive, at least these past probably 7 to 10 years, as our accuracy level has gone up, as more and more people get online. It's been a boon to me to have the social media because people are out there just spewing out stuff like mad that they never did in the early days of the internet. And so I've been able to get all kinds. Well, you probably noticed how our accuracy level has gone up. I was able to say in July, I think I said, oh, Trump's going to win. And then in August or September, I made a video and said, here's the 3 things that are going to happen. That Trump's going to win, Hillary's going to go missing, and they're going to try to have the election overturned, but it won't matter. It'll be a historical footnote. Well, we've had 2 of those things already occur, and perhaps this 3rd one is also forming up. And all of these this accuracy level all comes out of the growth in the Internet over these past few years and the eruption of all these different kinds of social media. So, I mean, actually, it sounds really stupid because of all the photographs involved, but you wouldn't believe how much stuff I actually get out of Snapchat. And some of these other things. It's really goofy, you know, because the way that people interact with it, they just leak out psychic impressions like mad in these quick little bursts of they're not as self-censoring when they're doing the fun kind of social media. And so you get a lot of really good stuff coming out of there.
Yeah, that's neat. And, you know, that night vision you're talking about, it's funny you brought that up because several months ago, I had a chance to meet the gentleman that actually owns the patents on night vision, and I met him by unseen events that weren't really that good because I had a dear friend that passed away, and he was related to him, so he came down and stuff. But I ended up becoming friends with this guy, and I went out to his house a couple months after, and I had a chance to interview him. Such a nice person. He lives out in Dallas. And he was saying, you know, when he designed the night vision, he certainly didn't design it for war applications. He never wanted it to be used for that. And he told me some stuff off air that just, wow, it really makes you realize how influential the Department of Defense actually is. If you look at the monies that they have, it's funny because, you know, my parents are great people. Are they awake on some things? Yes, absolutely. And other things, I certainly hope they'll become aware of it. And my mom was saying, well, you know, even with health care, I wouldn't mind paying a little bit more taxes for having health care for everybody. That's the kind of person she is. Just bless her heart, she's that nice of a person. She was a nurse. She's retired now. I've seen her literally save people's lives. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. But anyway, so I said, Mom, you know, if the defense contractors didn't take 50% or more of the tax money already combined with everything else, you wouldn't have to pay anymore. We could have free health care, and we wouldn't even have to pay the kind of taxes we pay. And she said, you know what? You're absolutely right.
Well, it's even worse than that. It's 18.5% of our GDP is now tied up in Obamacare. Okay, this is Obamacare. Let's just say the healthcare industry in the United States. The 18.5% covers the insurance part of it and all of the actual delivery of healthcare to the people. So it's more than just the healthcare system. It's also the insurance, all the millions of people that work in the paperwork part of it all, right? That are not like your mom and my mom, who is also a nurse, that went out and helped people. So you've got all the people that are on the insurance side of it all. Here's our real problem. The whole global economy, or the whole global investment world says, no, it's too risky to put money into Russia. 16% of their economy is tied up in oil and gas. Why, if the price of oil and gas goes down, Russia's cooked. You know, their economy is gone. Right. And so that is true. They've got a huge reliance on oil and gas. They're not very diversified. The extreme of that is Saudi Arabia. If oil and gas goes down, Saudi Arabia, they really suffer in terms of the prices and so on. Well, here in the United States, we're in a weird situation where we've got an insurance industry that is driving a medical monopoly that is not delivering health care and is, not delivering health. It is delivering health care. And its end result is a perpetual involvement with the medical system, not to get you out. And at the same time, it is now 18.5% of our economy, and it has officially made us a banana republic. Because when we would go down and invade countries in Central America in the Smedley-Butler era of the late 1800s and early 1900s, we were invading countries who had 18 and 20% of their economy based on a single fruit item, a banana in this particular instance. And so here we are basically living in a republic that is dominated by a single industry. And so this, in my opinion, is why one of the real tough reasons, one of the central reasons it's going to be real tough for anybody in any new administration to undo this, because they will have so many vested interests say, no, you can't do that. 10 million people will lose their jobs if you get rid of this stuff and go to a single payer system. We won't need these 10 million people to try and sell insurance to the other people in the United States. And if you get rid of this, we'll lose another 6 million here and so on. So they'll approach it as a works issue, right? But it is an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves with the new Trump administration. And that unfortunate situation has nothing to do with Trump or the Republicans or any of that. It has to do with our economics. We're actually at a point in our cycle where those last 2 pennies in the U.S. dollar are getting eroded very, very rapidly, and pretty soon it will be absolutely worth nothing. And then at that point, and in fact, right now, much of the United States economy operates on a barter system. And that barter system is going sort of unnoticed as the rest of us are devolving into the death of the dollar. And this is something that had been in our data set since 1997. Now, because I didn't know what I was doing and I was picking up clues and stuff and trying to put timing clues to them, I thought, oh, well, the death of the dollar stuff's got to be 2005, no later. And, well, about that time, we got into the peak of the housing market, and we started getting into the crash, and I was just really surprised that we were able to keep the thing going as long as we did. Okay, so we're at a really interesting point in my data. I'm like all whipped up. Okay, I'm very buoyed up by it all because we now have all of these major themes that I've been tracking since 1997 that are all pushing and coming together and collectively appear to meet up for bigger and better things around March of this coming year. We've got the space aliens coming in, we've got the ancient civilizations, we've got the death of the religion, we've got the death of the petrodollar, we've got the Pizzagate, the pedophiles coming on out. That was originally forecast in like 2003, and it's going to affect all kinds of things. I mean, it's going to do a huge number in a way that has yet to be seen on the Catholic Church. As an aside, it's also going to take out things like CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, and the 322 Society over the course of these next few years. So it's going to be a point of now we can actually say to ourselves, we are change because we're going to be living through it. But let me tell you something.
Just don't say it backwards.
No. No. Here's the things, though. Within the data, sometimes I just get strange stuff that, floats through. I mean, well, most of it, all of it is strange. But occasionally I get stuff that seems to be referencing the work itself, okay? And that I can actually, it's not like the data is talking to me or anything like that, but it is as though the memes that are circulating through the greater part of humanity are reflective, if you will, or quasi-self-aware in a sense, in that occasionally I'll get some words here and that seem to reflect our experience within what the data is talking about. Usually I just get, details, facts, like, there's going to be a power outage. It's going to last, it's going to hit suddenly. It's going to last 3 days in this area, 3 weeks in somewhere else, and it's going to be centered around a place that's full of train tracks, and it's got all these grates for filtering stuff out going into storm water, and it's near this particular power plant. That's inaccurate. I actually got all of that stuff before the big Northeast power outage a decade or more back. I had an accurate, factual description of where it would originate and all of this kind of stuff. That's usually what I get. I get stuff that says a boat's going to be in terrible hurt, it's going to sink, and it's all going to be due to a blonde woman being on the bridge at the wrong time. That happened with the Costa Concordia when it crashed. And so the language was accurate and was factual. But occasionally, just like maybe once or twice a year, we'll get something that actually speaks to our experience that we're all going to have as we go through this. And so I've got some of that now about what's coming up in January, February, March, and April. And I say that time period simply because it's in short-term data, and that usually involves about 4 months. And so within that period of time, the data sets are describing our experience as being continuous change to the point where you wake up every day not yet digesting the change of the previous day and knowing that you haven't got a clue as to how your day is going to change that day, but you know it will. So it's going to be, we're not going to be shell-shocked. It's not being described as a negative at all. It's just coming off as though every single day you'll just have to put aside all the stuff you're trying to integrate from all the changes yesterday just to cope with the changes of today. And that's what our next 4 months are going to be like.
Let me jump in real quick, too, because I remember back in 2010, you were really talking about how the Webbots were picking up on this weird behavior, essentially, like this crescendo, and more extreme than you'd ever seen before, to the point of just earth changes. And I think that you felt back in the day that it might even be more intense than it was, at least at first. But I think that what you were picking up on was Fukushima.
It may indeed have been the case. May have been, yes. And we knew months ahead of time. I think about, so that would have been, I want to say September of the previous year. So it occurred on March, and so September of the year before that, without understanding what we were trying to describe, we were basically describing what was going to happen there. And indeed, we're still living with the effects of that. You know, they've got radioactive fish here on the West Coast. Any day I turn on my calibrated paddle-based nuclear radiation meter. I mean, it's a real serious piece of work here. Anytime I turn that on these days, I get a background radiation that's 45 to 60 clicks per minute. Whereas when I first did that in 1998 with this machine, I was getting 8 clicks per 5 minutes. So we've vastly escalated the amount of radiation that we're all living with and all having to deal with. And that, by the way, brings us back once again to my insistence that everybody really look to their diet and start with the minerals. Once you've got the appropriate basis for minerals, then you can proceed from there. A lot of these minerals, by the way, will prevent and block radiation from affecting you. Not like, you know, if you were to walk into a nuclear power plant, not that kind of thing, but the level of radiation that you might accidentally ingest walking around is going to be offset by having these minerals in you, because those metals that are radioactive won't find an appropriate spot to bond in your body.
Also, I've noticed, because I've got a radiation detector built into my watch. It's a MTM watch. You know, I mean, it was $1,500. It works good. I go everywhere with it, and essentially the radiation levels here in San Antonio have almost doubled on a regular basis, a consistent level since 2013. When I picked it up in 2013, it would hover around 0.07 microsieverts. That's extreme. That's pretty darn low. But now it's hovering 0.14, 0.16 the other day, and even though that's not high, that's consistent, and that's double what it used to be. I mean, what's going on with that?
The whole, it's not just Fukushima. I mean, we've got radiation leaks all around the planet, and the radiation is also increasing because we had the atmosphere, top of our atmosphere ripped off, and so we no longer have the radiation shield from the strange energies from space. This may be a natural thing. Maybe the planets, all the planets grow that are alive. Mars doesn't grow anymore because it doesn't have a plasma core, as near as I can tell. But all the other planets that do have plasma cores are in fact actively growing. And it may be that it's necessary that radiation increase as part of the expansion process as well, because there appears to be not only man-made radiation sources appearing everywhere. Well, no, let me say, no, it doesn't appear. It is now factually confirmed that we've got new sources of highly radioactive material pouring out of the middle of the Earth that are being dumped into the bottom of the oceans through these extreme thermal vents, where before we would always focus on the fact that they've got, 6,000 degree water coming out of them, or whatever the temperature is. Now we're able to see that, it's not just heavily mineraled water that's coming out. A lot of those minerals are radioactive. And so some of this is indeed percolating up in a natural fashion. Not all of it can be blamed on Fukushima. But again, let's hammer it one more time and then I'll let it go. Go out, find your mineral needs and take care of them to prevent what those radioactive isotopes that are getting into you from doing the damage that they all probably are.
Well, I certainly appreciate you giving our audience some, good ideas on how to protect themselves, keep themselves healthier, and offset some of the elements. And with maybe the last 10 minutes we have, Clif, first of all, I just want to say this has been the best interview I've ever done with you, so thank you.
Sure, glad to, yeah.
What would you feel is important to share with our audience that maybe you've picked up on, either in the out the reports, outside of the reports, all of the above, that maybe I haven't asked the question to that I should have?
Well, there's all kinds of stuff that we should pay attention to. The question for my personal approach to things, I would like everybody to be happy, healthy, and well fed, so that I don't have to live with a bunch of people that are irritable, starving, and a pain in the butt.
Right.
So I'd like everyone to really start looking, especially as in the United States, especially as we go through these next couple of years, towards providing some of their own food sources. That is to say, growing some of their own food. The reason I'm suggesting this is because we already have confirmed evidence that we're now into a solar minimum that won't peak until the next 7 years, till 2022, I think, okay, or 2024, somewhere in there it'll peak. But we're in a solar maximum, and our solar maximum has levels that don't even reach the same level of solar output that we usually see in a minimum. So we're headed into an ice age. Now, this ice age is going to make all of our food costs go up, and especially here in our calorie oil-dependent agriculture system, we're going to suffer a huge increase in prices that are going to go over these next few years, independent of what happens to the money, independent of what happens to politics and agriculture, simply because the sun is not providing us as much light as before. And this, of course, is aggravated with the chemtrails. So we all need to start, in my opinion, contributing to the food body that we are consuming from, not only for ourselves, but for everybody else. Basically, if I can grow calories here in the Northwest, then I don't have to import them from California. That way I don't have to use as much oil that'll be highly restricted 2 years from now, and I won't have to worry about the 5 times cost I would have to pay 2 years from now for that food. And I'll actually also aid the country by reducing my impact on the overall food supply. And so everybody that does that, it's like the best food growing system this planet has ever seen, produced in anything like the last 3,000 years, existed in Russia prior to 1917. That country was able to feed half the world off of small organic farms in the most efficient calorie production system ever devised. The Russian agricultural system at that point, before the Bolshevik Revolution, took 15 calories of human effort to return 145 surplus calories. So it was almost a 10-to-1 return. And right now, we're on the opposite side of that. Every calorie I consume that I purchase, it costs us 10 to 20 calories to produce that calorie. And most of those calories are dependent on oil. So basically, when the oil goes, we can't run combines on solar. We can't run combines on wind. When the oil goes, if we don't have the gold to pay for it, to pay for our energy, then you're going to see they'll actually probably get to the point where there would be, if the power elite is still in control, there would be some effort towards a cultural revolution that would strike us the same way it struck China when they went through it. And it was entirely in China. It was entirely a monetary event that forced the political consequences that led to the Cultural Revolution. And the Cultural Revolution was an attempt to keep the powers that be in place during this incredible economic time that they were going through that also hit their agricultural system. So we have very similar parallels to that, and I'm afraid that our powers that be might try and seize on the same solution, which is to create a cultural revolution out of young people that would take over and upend the whole society. Tens of millions of people would die, and thus relieve the pressure on the social order, because those people wouldn't be eating anymore. It's kind of a simplification of it all, but that's really the situation we're sort of heading into, is that we've got a solar output waning that has been ongoing for 7 or 8 years now and will continue at least for the next 7 or 8 years, and maybe longer. There's all other kinds of indications we're going into an ice age, and you don't see any of our powers that be at the moment doing anything to prepare for that, unlike the 1950s. In the 1950s, they knew we were heading to an ice age, and everybody was trying their best to come up with solutions that would allow the United States as a country, as a nation, to exist when parts of it may be in glaciation and other parts are unable to grow food.
Right. And then I guess also with the technologies that we do have access to, people can do little things like go pick up some solar panels, wind turbines, etc., get off the grid as much as they can. I mean, that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm slowly building my solar.
Okay, I hate to say it this way, but why bother? If you've got chemtrails in your area, forget it. I've had solar here since the year 2000, and it doesn't do me a damn bit of good anymore because of the chemtrails. The amount I'm producing off of there, it's not even worth having the panels.
That's terrible. It's actually interesting because I'm not powering my house yet, but I am my mobile studio. I just got back from the Ozarks, And there's a place out there where it's called My Ozark Homestead, and Jeff is building this community with other really cool people. They're in the process of putting together just this incredible bunker system from some very top-notch people that have worked in some very influential circles. And the price points that they're doing on these tiny homes in this community it's retarded. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I went out there to check it out, and, you know, I mean, I had a really good feeling when I interviewed him the first time, but I just wanted to confirm because it had such good response from the interview that I did with him. I go out there, check it out. Everything Jeff said he was going to do, he's either doing now or in the process of doing. I met some new members out there that are actually building, and they're putting together these tiny homes essentially for a few $1,000s on land for people. And then they're in the process of putting together a bunker system as well that's, you know, top-notch. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I went out there and I took my solar panels and stuff, and the chemtrails had the clouds full force, but I was still managing to pick up a small amount of power for my mobile studio. But to do an entire house, it would probably take $50,000 or maybe less. But it's just, if you look at the cost conversion ratio, like you said, you're probably better off not even going that route because of the chemtrails and stuff. But do you think that there's ways we can get around that? I mean, we don't want to just say, no, it's too late. Let's not worry about it.
Solar is photovoltaics, as we understand them for solar, is it's a cul-de-sac. They will never be able to increase the efficiency enough to make it worthwhile. I mean, if you were to look at the claims of efficiency, you'll see that there's some solar panels claiming 11 and 12% continuous, and that's kind of bogus because you get a little tiny bit of shade on them. I've done experiments with the solar panels, and I can prove that no matter how they're wired, you go from 10 watts down to 1 watt with just a small percentage of the panel covered up. And the reason it has to do with the way the photovoltaics are constructed. We need a radically different approach to harvesting solar energy or light energy if that is going to be a viable approach. We won't get there with photovoltaics. Plus, there's another factor there. If you look at the cost to produce the photovoltaics, it's a net energy loss. The photovoltaics are just not going to get us where we need to go.
How to? Let's discover together. Please subscribe.